on September 13, 2024, and then endorsed by the Council of Ministers. We, the ambassador, being representative of IGAD member states that guaranteed implementation of the revitalized agreement on the resolution of the conflict in the Republic of South Sudan, met to build consensus around this important national issue. In coming up with a common positive, we took note that the fact the election is a process which, as part of the peace agreement, ought to be based on a permanent constitution. We also took note of the achievement and the potential benefit of the Tumeni initiative, having considered the justification for extension given by the presidency. We unanimously agreed to support the decision to extend the transitional period due to the prevailing circumstances of the country, including but not limited to the difficult socio-economic condition, lack of adequate preparation by the election constitution in the security sector. As much as election is important, peace and security are paramount for stability of the country and the region at large. The international community to continue supporting the implementation of the peace agreement within the extended period. This will not only help the country attain lasting peace and stability, but installation of democratically elected government by the people of South Sudan. Therefore, we call upon all partners nationally, regionally, and internationally to join effort in completing efforts, resource, and support in a coordinated fashion for synergy.
This decision might be shocking and disappointing for many of you, but we are in the government of Sudan and understand fully the internal challenges facing the government of South Sudan through the past 2 years. And in addition to this, we also consider the negative consequences of the war erupted in Sudan in April 2023, where we can see the severe impact on the economy of South Sudan and lack of funds due to the loss of their oil revenues from more than 100,000 barrels per day. We know the decision might not be the decision you wanted to see or to support, but we believe it's the best one among other worst decisions you could imagine. This peace agreement belongs to the government and the people of South Sudan, and whatever consequence occurred due to this decision, they should be the first to be asked or commended. We, the regional and international partners, should remain supportive to the current transitional government by all means, and we should give them another chance to prove themselves right. We should continue our support for peace process in South Sudan bilaterally and through regional and international organizations, and we should continue our interaction and engagement to help the people of South Sudan in achieving their dreams of a stable and prosperous country. Saying the above, the government of Sudan, as one of the grantors of the revitalized peace agreement, hereby acknowledge the decision to extend the transitional government of the Republic of South Sudan for 24 months until February 2027, at the will of the parties of the revitalized peace agreement, and we welcome it.
The Republic of South Africa, we commend the manner with which the parties signatory to the peace agreement have conducted themselves in the process of taking the decision to postpone the elections and extend the transitional period. We witnessed high levels of political and institutional maturity, high levels of trust and political will among the parties. In our view, this communicated the unequivocal message that the South Sudanese are committed to the Africa we want, an Africa and South Sudan that is peaceful, democratic, and prosperous. We therefore call on the international community, the region, and friends of South Sudan to fully support the decision of South Sudanese. We further call on us as the international community working together with the South Sudanese to increase our contributions and double our efforts in order to increase the speed of implementation of the key provisions of the peace agreement, critical for a democratic and peaceful end of the transitional period. Therefore, pursuant to Article 8.4 of the RX, on behalf of South Africa, we give our full consent to the decision of the South Sudanese to amend the revitalized agreement on the resolution of conflict in South Sudan, to extend the transitional period and postpone the conduct of election.
Want to begin by welcoming the decision of the presidency, the parties to the revitalized peace agreement, and Council of Ministers to delay elections and extend the transition period. The AU hopes that this will give the opportunity to all the institutions working on constitution-making, elections, and security to prepare adequately and in a timely manner for elections. Indeed, the full deployment of NUF, that is the Necessary Unification Force, is very important, and we hope this can be achieved in the near future. Excellencies, peace is paramount, and we commend all stakeholders for contributing to the peace and stability of South Sudan thus far. It is incumbent on us as stakeholders to continue to work together to maintain this peace and ensure that the aspirations of the South Sudanese people are fully met. We all also need to work together towards elections and the transition, and we hope it happens this time around. AU remains committed to the peace process in South Sudan and would lend its support in diverse ways, including through the AU Commission, its member states, indeed the C5, and the Panel of the Wise, even as the Peace and Security Council remains seized of the security situation in the country. Finally, the AU also encourages all parties to lend their support to the government of South Sudan and also the peace process to ensure that come 2 years from now, we will contribute to hold elections towards peace, security, and democracy.
Today, at this extraordinary meeting of RGMEC, we are presented with a proposal to endorse the extension of the transitional period of our access by another 24 months to allow time to complete outstanding tasks that are necessary, among others, for the conduct of free and credible elections. The process of amending our access to extend the transitional period has already been set in motion by a decision of the presidency and its subsequent endorsement by the Council of Ministers are per Article 8.4 of our access. It's now incumbent upon this forum to thoroughly deliberate and decide on the matter at hand. IGAD, as the midwife of the guarantor and guarantor of the revitalized agreement, has always been clear and firm regarding the fact that the ownership of our access are the South Sudanese parties and stakeholders
and hence they shoulder the primary responsibility of implementation. By virtue of being the owners of the agreement, they are also ultimate decision makers on the fate of our access. Our role as partners is to support, chaperone, and guide them in their effort toward achieving sustainable peace and democracy. In this regard, the parties have consensusly agreed that under prevailing circumstances to extend the transitional period is the better course of action for South Sudan than holding election in December 24, in an environment where even the most basic requirements for elections are not in place, including consensus among the parties on the conduct of elections. Under such circumstances, IGAD believes that the extension of the transitional period, though not the ideal option, is the lesser evil that helps to prevent possible discord and crisis that might occur if elections are conducted in December 2024. In view of this, IGAD supports the proposal extension of the transitional period. Having said that, I would also like to mention that IGAD is extremely concerned that the continued extension of the implementation period of the revitalized peace agreement, which were all avoidable, is not the best interest of the people of South Sudan, and therefore it is responsibility of the parties to break the cycle of perpetual transition that seem to have become synonymous with South Sudan. I would like to remind all of us this proposal extension is the fourth one since the signing of our access on 12 September 2018. It will be recalled that the pre-transitional period was extended twice, and now that the transition period also twice. As a result, an agreement whose implementation was supposed to be concluded within 44 months is now taking 110 months, which means implementation has taken 57 more months to complete. What is more worrying is that none of the previous 3 extensions had achieved their intended objectives. Therefore, one is justified in asking what guarantees are there that the 4th extension would yield a different outcome. Being mindful of this dismal track record, IGAD supports this extension with the hope and condition that there will be assurances, guarantees, and/or mechanism to ensure timely and full implementation during the proposed extended period. These assurances and guarantees should be able to address recurrent and pervasive challenges that have been hindering implementation, including trust deficit and lack of political will and lack of funding. In conclusion, I would like to seize this opportunity to urge the Artegano to conclude the Tumaini process in the shortest time possible in an inclusive, transparent manner so as to ensure the inclusivity, continuity, and sustainability of peace in this beautiful country that we all dearly support.
While the UN will endorse the extension of the transitional period, we do so with real regret and disappointment. 2 years ago, we were in an identical situation as we are today, and we gave our support specifically under the condition that there would be no more extensions. Today, it is sadly evident that the country is not ready for elections that we could confidently expect to generate a credible and peaceful outcome, necessitating from our part a consideration of the extension proposal. While the modality and timelines for ending the transitional period are the sovereign right of South Sudan, we would want to highlight that in regard to critical decisions regarding the way forward, there is still a mountain to climb. Urgency rather than a pause is required. At the least, this demands a clear timeline linked to critical benchmarks that would restore confidence in the process. As noted by the United Nations Secretary General in April and again in July, the implementation of a critical mass of matters necessary for the peaceful conduct of free, fair and credible elections remains unmet. I reiterate the Secretary General's call for the parties to commit to taking urgent steps together in order to conduct these elections. The peaceful conduct of credible elections and the implementation of the outcome of those elections is a shared strategic goal of South Sudan stakeholders and the regional and international partners. This delay is not for want of support by UNMISS and its partners. Since the first UN South Sudan Electoral Needs Assessment Mission mandated by the Security Council in 2021, the subsequent assessment, including the trilateral needs assessment mandated by the African Union Peace and Security Council in 2022, we and our partners have extended support to the government and to all its national commissions. To inject a sense of urgency and prioritization in the process, in July 2023, these efforts found expression in the presentation of 10 priority areas that needed urgent decision and attention for elections to be possible in 2024. It is telling that as matters stand, only one element of the 10 points has been achieved. I emphasize that the transitional government and the South Sudanese political class must take responsibility for the failure of the past 2 years. The response of the ordinary citizens to these failures and their disappointment has been evident in the past couple of weeks. The leadership must therefore recognize that confidence will have to be restored. As we look at the new implementation measures and timelines being discussed by the High-Level Standing Committee and the Tumaini Initiative, we would underscore that what is lacking is not so much new structures and mechanisms, but real political will necessary for the first elections since the country's independence. Your Excellency, in conclusion, it is time for South Sudan's leaders to prioritize the interests of the nation, rebuild public trust and confidence, open up the necessary political and civic space for elections, engage and accommodate all voices and viewpoints, including the non-signatory parties in the Tumaini Initiative, with a view to breaking this, as my colleague from IGAD has called it, perpetual cycle of continuous transition in South Sudan, and pave the way towards an inclusive and sustainable peace. In that regard, the United Nations stands ready to support the transitional process in South Sudan, including through the many efforts being undertaken jointly with our partners, IGAD and the African Union.
In the past 2 years, South Sudan's peace process has made positive progress, but some key tasks in areas such as the security arrangements, the permanent constitution-making process, and the preparation for general elections have not yet been completed. There were different opinions among the signatories to the revitalized agreement on whether to hold elections in December 2024. If the elections are held without consensus, it may cause controversy and even undermine the current hard-earned peace and stability. China supports the African people in solving African issues in the African way, respects South Sudan's sovereignty and independence, and supports South Sudan in exploring a development path that suits its national conditions. Given that the parties to the revitalized agreement have reached a consensus on extending the transitional period, and China respects South Sudanese government's decision to extend the transitional period, we call on all parties to maintain solidarity and implement the revitalized agreement earnestly to ensure the lasting peace and stability in the country. We hope the international community could fully understand the difficulties in the peace process and continue to provide constructive support to South Sudan. And China will also continue to make positive contributions to the peace and development of South Sudan.
The United Kingdom will abstain today, but not because we are against the peace process. In fact, peace is our priority, and we remain convinced that peace can best be secured through legitimate and peaceful elections. The promises the RRCs represents to the people of South Sudan and the conditions it sets out to meet that promise are crucial to achieve the peace and stability this country needs. But our vote is intended to register our deep disappointment in the failure of the transitional government to implement what it has promised when it first extended that agreement in 2020. It is a reflection of the government's failure to act when this body first raised concerns over the glacial pace of implementation last year. It is a reflection of the failure to register or address the 10 key issues identified by UNMISS, the AU and IGAD. And it is a reflection of the failure to act on the repeated warnings from the reports by the UN SRSG throughout the last couple of years. This proposal for an extension has not come about because of a lack of support from the international community. It has not come about due to a lack of resources, and it has certainly not come about by any sort of constitutional crisis created by the political actors here. It has come about, and we should be clear about this, because of a lack of political will over the last 2 years by the leaders of this country. The transitional government of national unity collectively own this decision in full and will be accountable to the people of South Sudan who survey after survey demonstrates want elections. We note the commitment to delivering the conditions necessary for the holding of peaceful, transparent and inclusive elections as soon as possible. But I'm afraid democracy delayed is democracy denied. There is a need to engage all parties, including the non-signatories, to build on the Tumani process and to demonstrate how this proposed extension would progress what in the last years we have failed to deliver. To succeed, the process of developing this plan must be consultative, inclusive, and transparent. We also note the commitment to fund the majority of the cost of financing for the institutions that implement the peace process. We join the chairman of RJMEC and others who have mentioned this and urge the government of South Sudan to now come forward with a credible and transparent plan as to how reasonable costs will be met. Mr. Chairman, actions always speak louder than words. Commitments were made in 2022, commitments were made in 2020, commitments were made in 2018. We simply cannot find ourselves in a position of considering an extension again in 2026. A credible plan for delivering the conditions that will allow an election to take place, and those conditions include civil and political space, as members of civil society highlighted, is necessary to demonstrate how the next 24 months will be different to the last 24 months and the 24 months before that. Those are the reasons we're abstaining, but I should emphasize that the United Kingdom is and will continue to be unwavering in its support to the people of South Sudan.
Regarding the vote later in this meeting, Norway will abstain. Norway has been a friend of the South Sudanese people for more than 50 years. They deserve peace, human rights, and democracy. The decision to extend the peace agreement stands in stark opposition to what was promised in 2022, in 2018, and 2015. There is short time to demonstrate real commitment. First step is to present a credible plan, including financing from the government of South Sudan. The people of South Sudan have not voted since independence 13 years ago. The leaders of South Sudan must deliver on their promises. It becomes a question of legitimacy. Norway supports the Tumaini initiative because it presents an opportunity to create a conducive environment. We expect that the Tumaini initiative continues, and we also expect a positive engagement from the government.
We regret that another extension has become necessary and that the commitments made by the political leaders to the people of South Sudan were not delivered upon following the signing of the roadmap in August 22, and which foresees the end of the transitional period in February 25. The roadmap is even called towards the end of the transitional period. The peace agreement was designed to guarantee sustainable peace for the people of South Sudan, who have suffered from violence, insecurity, and lack of rule of law for far too long. It remains essential to preserve the integrity and the validity of this agreement. It is now incumbent on the political leaders to ensure that the people of South Sudan are at last allowed to decide about their own future and that their aspirations are met. The 2 extra years need to make a difference at last. They have to be used effectively to implement the outstanding provisions, and there are many, as we have heard, of the peace agreement, especially as regards a conducive and safe environment for free, fair, and credible and peaceful elections, and a permanent constitution that reflects the will of the people. 2 years ago, we had the question, we asked, what is different this time? We posed the same question again. Regarding funding, we expect that the government of South Sudan will make a commitment to use its own resources, including the natural resources, to fund relevant institutions. External donors will only chip in if we are seen to be serious and accountable in our expenditure. This is encouraging to hear. The European Union keeps supporting the Tumaini initiative as a means to facilitate the implementation of the peace agreement to which we remain committed. Again, we regret that another extension is necessary for its implementation. The European Union, and I talk also in the name of the member states, abstain.
My name is Joanne Mins, Ambassador for Canada and representing today the IGAD Partners Forum, the IPF. Though the IPF group has collectively agreed on a vote in support of the extension of the peace agreement for 24 months, it's important to note that there was not a consensus among IPF members on this vote. However, all IPF members are in unanimous agreement on the following points: that every effort should be made to conduct free, fair, credible, and peaceful elections as soon as possible at the end of the extended period, that it's critically important to consult and engage all parties, including non-signatories, in the process, for example, through mechanisms such as the Tumaini Initiative, that it is necessary to show a clear time schedule and process to finalize all pending tasks enumerated in the chapters of the RRCS without delay, giving special importance to the deployment of necessary unified forces across the country, which is vital for South Sudan to reach its desired objectives. And that the transitional government has a further responsibility to provide its citizens and the international community with a detailed and transparent explanation of how it will ensure that required resources are made available to the necessary institutions. IPF members remain committed in their support to the people of South Sudan.
We do welcome your concerns when it comes to the implementation of RRCs. We do agree with you that important provisions of this agreement were not implemented. We also agree that we may have contributed in one way or the other when it comes to delay of these provisions. In regard to what will we do different this time, we have no magic to wake up in the morning and say it is going to be this way. But as high-level standing committee, we have made proposals to the leadership, which were endorsed. And it is our hope, like any of you, that the leadership will stick to this proposal and make sure that we deliver during this extension. I think it's important, and some talk about it earlier, that 90% or 85% of our budget come from oil revenue. Today, 70% of our oil production since February 6th is shut down due to the war in Sudan. And one is also reminded by the war in Sudan that the lifeline of this country is dependent on oil. However, I'm not here to deny the fact that at some point there were money that would have been used for this particular work. And that is the reason that the high-level committee saw it necessary that there is need for austerity measures to be taken so that we implement provisions of this agreement. But also, we need to take this into account at the same time that we are not only here to write for election. We have an agreement to implement, and it is that agreement, the end of it is election. That's why it's important that we give ourselves the opportunity to extend the period, unify the army, come up with a permanent constitution, because also the very agreement said the election shall be conducted based on the permanent constitution. To our partners, I think you all need to appreciate the fact that for us to come together, we have different views, but we are united by the purpose. We are united by the fact that we have a country to preserve. We have a country to maintain. We have a country that we don't want to disintegrate in our hands. And this brings us to the fact that on the 22nd of this month, the government is supposed to be dissolved. What if the government is dissolved and your environment is not ready for election come 22nd of December? What do you do? Where do you go? And this brings me to the question of Tumaini. We were asked yesterday when we made ambassadors, but here is what we wanted to say. Imagine a situation that the government is dissolved, or you have not extended and you have not dissolved the government, but you have no legitimacy come the 22nd of September. Who is going to negotiate with the all-out groups? There must be government in place to negotiate with all-out groups in Tumaini. If the intention of Tumaini is to bring peace, inclusive peace in the Republic of South Sudan, then you need RRCs. But if the intention of Tumaini is to replace RRCs, then you have so many other questions to answer. To some of us, we think we need Tumaini to be an annex to an RRCs. And it will not be an annex if RRCs is dead. It will only be an annex when RRCs is alive. And that's the reason why we are saying today, we are requesting all of you to support this extension so that you have an RRCs that is alive, and it is this RRCs that produce Artigono. It is this Artigono to go to Nairobi and sit with the whole-out groups and negotiate. But it's not the other way around. I would like to say that we need support in the process of implementing the extended period. We cannot lie to ourselves that we will do it alone. No. We need each and everyone who is here today.
For the region, I can only appreciate how you have stood with us for very many years. And you continue to stand with us. Because as a region, you know also that there are people who are destabilizing our region. And you can look around. Where is Sudan, which was a very strong country in the region? Where is it? If Kenya did not have a national army, professional national army, Kenya today would have been in turmoil. If Uganda does not have a strong leader, Uganda would be in turmoil today. Any country with multiple armies in their hands is not safe. Look at the DRC. Look at Chad. Look at Central African Republic. And look at West African countries where there are a lot of armed groups. We don't want to do that. We want to avoid that. We want to have one national army and only political parties, no more. So we want to thank the wisdom of the region for recognizing the challenges that we have just presented. And if there is anybody within the region who does not stand with us, please, today, the people of South Sudan want your vote. It's not us. We are the leaders who can be replaced anytime. And the Bible says, in leadership, there is a failure, but there's also success. The worst thing you can do as a leader is to discontinue the cause of your people. And we refuse to disregard the cause of our people. We want you in the region to support our people.